A few years before the pandemic, me and a group of my college friends took a road trip to a beach house for spring break. The house was in Florida and was owned by the family of one of us. I'll call him Jake for this story. Jake had grown up in the area, so he knew some other places we could visit, though we were mainly going there to chill on the beach and have fun. Altogether, there were 4 of us: me, Jake, Mike, and Alex. We were all pumped to ditch the stress of college for a week of sun, sand, and maybe a few too many beers. The beach house was everything we'd hoped for, right on the shore with a massive deck overlooking the ocean. The first couple of days were a blast, swimming, playing volleyball, and hitting up the local bars at night. It felt like the perfect escape. But on the 3rd night, things started getting weird. We decided to have a bonfire on the beach, just the 4 of us, laughing and swapping stories as the fire crackled. That's when I noticed something odd out of the corner of my eye. About 100 yards away, right at the edge of the firelight, there was a figure standing still. It looked like a woman, and she seemed to be staring straight at us. "Hey guys, do you see that?" I said, pointing towards her. They all turned to look. Mike shouted, "Hello, do you need something?" But she didn't say a word. Instead, she just turned and walked off into the darkness. "That was weird," Alex said, but then he tried immediately to brush it off. Probably just some local out for a walk. "Yeah, maybe," I replied, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been watching us, not just standing there by chance. The next day, we were lounging in the living room when Jake pulled some old photo albums off a shelf. "Check this out, guys. These are from when I was a kid." We flipped through them, cracking up at Jake's awkward childhood phases, but then I noticed something strange. In several of the pictures, school events, birthday parties, random snapshots, there was this girl in the background. She wasn't in every photo, and in fact it was just a couple, but it was still enough that it caught my eye. And in every photo where she was there, she was looking at Jake. "Jake, who's that girl?" I asked, pointing her out. He squinted at the photo. I'm not sure. Maybe someone from my class? I don't remember her name." "Yeah, she's in several of these," Mike said, flipping through the pages. "And she's always staring at you, dude." Jake laughed it off. Guess I was a big deal back then, but I could tell he was a little unnerved. That night, I woke up to a noise outside, soft footsteps crunching on the deck. I got out of bed and peeked through the window, but there was nothing there. When I turned to head back, I spotted something on the floor near the front door, a piece of paper that hadn't been there before. I picked it up and read it. "Welcome back, Jake." The handwriting was shaky, like whoever wrote it was in a hurry, or too excited to keep steady. I showed it to the guys the next morning, and we all agreed it was creepy as hell. "Maybe it's that woman from the beach," Alex suggested. "Let's just be careful," I said. "Let's double check all the doors and windows tonight." After that, we tried to push it out of our minds and just enjoy the trip, and for a couple days, nothing happened. Then Jake had an idea. "Why don't we take a drive to my old childhood home? It's only like 30 minutes away, in a quieter part of town." We all thought it sounded cool, a little adventure to mix things up. On the drive there, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. At one point, I swore I saw a car tailing us, a beat-up sedan keeping its distance. But when I pointed it out, it turned down a side street and disappeared. I'm probably just paranoid, I told myself. Soon after that, we pulled up to Jake's childhood home, a modest place that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The yard was overgrown and the paint was peeling off the walls. "My parents sold it a long time ago," Jake explained. "I guess it's been vacant ever since." We walked up to the front door, and to our surprise, it swung open with a light push. "That's weird," Jake said. "Maybe the realtor forgot to lock it." Stepping inside, the air felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. It also wasn't as empty as we expected. There was fresh food in the kitchen, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter, and one of the beds upstairs looked slept in. Then we walked into Jake's old bedroom. That's when things went from strange to terrifying. The room was like a shrine. The walls were plastered with photos of Jake, some from high school and others from college. However, we lost it when we saw that some of the pictures were from this very trip. Those ones looked like they had been taken at a distance, and none of us remembered them being taken. There were also newspaper clippings about him, like the time he won a local award, and personal stuff, such as a hoodie I recognized from his dorm and a keychain he'd lost last year. And on the bed sat his old stuffed bear from when he was a kid, placed there like it was waiting for him. "What the hell?" Jake whispered, his face drained of color. Before he could process it, we heard footsteps coming up the stairs, slow, deliberate steps. We froze as a woman appeared in the doorway, the same woman we'd seen on the beach. She was holding a kitchen knife, her grip tight but trembling, and her eyes were locked on Jake. "Jake, I've been waiting for you," she said, her voice quivering with something between joy and desperation. You finally came back to me. Who are you? Jake demanded, trying to sound brave. You don't remember me. Her smile twisted into something bitter. We went to high school together. I was always there, watching you, loving you, but you never even noticed me. Look, I don't know what you want, but you need to leave us alone, Mike said, stepping forward. Then she thrust the knife towards him. No, Jake is mine. He belongs with me. Even though there were 4 of us, the situation was still incredibly tense. This woman was clearly deranged, and we knew she could snap at any second. Her body was also blocking the doorway. I scanned the room for anything to use as a weapon, but there was nothing within reach. Listen, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. We can talk about this. Maybe we can help you. I don't need help, she snapped. I just need Jake. Out of nowhere, Alex lunged at her, trying to grab the knife. She swung wildly, slicing his arm, and he stumbled back with a yell. That's when Jake reacted. He snatched a lamp off the nightstand and threw it as hard as possible at her. The lamp hit her chest, and she staggered, the knife clattering to the floor. We immediately bolted past her, racing down the stairs and out to the car. We sped off, Alex clutching his arm in the back seat, and called the police as soon as we had a signal. They met us back at the beach house, took our statements, and went to check the child at home. But when they got there, she was gone. The photos, the clippings, all the evidence of her obsession, that was still there, but she herself had vanished. Luckily, Jake's injury was minor, and after a few stitches at the emergency room, we were all back at the house. We packed up and left the next morning, cutting our spring break short. As we were loading the car, I found one last thing, a note tucked under the windshield wiper. It read, "I'll always be watching, Jake." We handed it over to the cops, but they couldn't really do much without her in custody. Unfortunately, months later, Jake started getting anonymous messages, emails, texts, always from new accounts. They'd say things like, "I miss you," and "We'll be together soon." He changed his number and blocked the emails, but somehow she'd find a way to reach him again. To this day, he can't walk alone without glancing over his shoulder, wondering if she's still out there, still watching, still waiting. 2 years ago, I went with my best friend Sabrina to Cancun for spring break. We were in our junior year of college and both 21, so we definitely planned to have a good time. The sun, the beaches, the nightlife, it was everything we dreamed of after a grueling semester. We were staying at a bustling resort packed with other students, and the energy was electric. Our goal? To let loose, dance, and make memories we'd talk about for years. Our second night there, we decided to hit up a beachside party we'd heard about from some people at the resort. It was one of those open-air events, lights strung up in the palm trees, a DJ blasting music, and a crowd of people dancing near the waves. Sabrina and I were in high spirits, sipping our drinks and swaying to the beat. We'd agreed to stick together and keep an eye out, knowing how wild these spring break scenes could get. About an hour in, 2 guys approached us. They introduced themselves as Alex and Tyler. They were both tall, tan, and confident, with easy smiles that made them blend right into the party vibe. They said they were from college up north and were just looking to hang out. At first, it seemed like harmless fun. They danced with us, cracked a few jokes, and even offered to grab us some water since we'd been out in the heat all night. We declined the offer, sticking to our rule of only drinking what we bought ourselves, but we didn't think much of it. As the night wore on, though, things started to shift. Alex kept trying to pull Sabrina away to check out the bonfire further down the beach, while Tyler stayed close to me, chatting nonstop like he was trying to keep me distracted. At one point, I caught Sabrina's eye across the crowd. She looked uneasy, subtly shaking her head. This is where my stomach began to twist, and I knew something wasn't right. "Let's head back to the main group," I said loudly, grabbing Sabrina's hand. "It's getting late." Tyler laughed, but his smile didn't seem genuine. "Late? The night's just starting. Come on, let's take a walk by the water. It's quieter down there." "No thanks," Sabrina said firmly, stepping closer to me. "We're good here." Alex's smile began to fade, and he exchanged a quick look with Tyler that sent a chill down my spine. "You don't want to miss the real party," he said, his voice low and insistent. Before we could even react, he grabbed Sabrina's wrist, not hard, but enough to make her flinch. That's when panic set in. I yanked her back toward me, shouting, "Get off her!" A few heads turned, but the music was too loud, and the crowd was too thick for anyone to really notice. The guy stepped closer, boxing us in against a cluster of palm trees. My heart was racing, and all I could think was that we were too far from the main party now, and too far from help. "We're leaving," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I scanned the area, desperate for an out. That's when I spotted a group of girls we'd met at the resort earlier, standing near a bar tent maybe 20 yards away. I didn't hesitate. "Hey, over here," I yelled, waving my arms like they were my best friends. "We've been looking for you guys." The girls looked confused, but waved back, probably thinking it was just spring break chaos. It was enough though. Alex and Tyler hesitated, glancing at the group, and we took our chance. We bolted toward the tent, shoving through the crowd, not daring to look back until we were surrounded by people again. When we finally stopped, gasping for air, I turned around. The guys were gone, swallowed up by the sea of partiers. Sabrina was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. "They were going to take us somewhere," she whispered. "I could feel it." We didn't stick around to find out. We grabbed a cab back to the resort, locked our door, and spent the rest of the night trying to process what just happened. The next day, we told the resort staff, but without much to go on, no last names and no clear evidence, they really couldn't do much. After that, we stuck to group outings, never wandering off alone again. Looking back, that night could have ended so differently. We thought we were being careful, but we let our guard down just enough for those guys to get close. The lesson hit us hard. No matter how fun or safe a place seems, you have to stay aware of your surroundings. Trust your gut, watch for the red flags, and don't be afraid to make noise if you're in trouble. I think doing that is what got us out alive. As a parent of a young child, I've faced many challenging and some terrifying situations. But just a few months ago, when I took our son to one of the nearby city parks, I had what in all honesty is the strangest experience of my life. I'm not even sure it was real, but in the moment it certainly felt like it. It was a cool, overcast Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the clouds hang low and the air feels heavy, almost expectant. My 4-year-old son Lucas had been cooped up inside all morning, and I could tell he was itching to burn off some energy. With my wife working late, I decided to take him to a small playground just a few blocks from our apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a patch of grass with a rusty swing set, a slide, and a couple of those bouncy animals bolted into the ground with thick metal springs. Lucas didn't care about the simplicity though. To him, it was an adventure waiting to happen. We got there around 3 p.m. The park was quieter than usual. A lone mother sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone while her toddler played in the sandbox, but otherwise we had the place to ourselves. Lucas made a beeline for the swings, giggling as I pushed him higher and higher. His laughter echoed through the empty park, and for a while everything felt normal, peaceful even. But that's exactly when I noticed something. Off to the side, near the chain-link fence that separated the playground from a narrow alley, there was a man. He was tall, dressed in a faded gray coat, his face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly in our direction. I told myself he was probably just a passerby, maybe waiting for someone, but the way he lingered set my nerves on edge. "Lucas, you want to try the bouncy horse?" I asked, trying to distract myself as much as him. He nodded eagerly and scrambled off the swing, racing toward the red plastic horse mounted on a heavy spring. I followed, keeping the man in my peripheral vision. When I glanced back, he was still there, unmoving. Lucas climbed onto the horse, gripping the handles as he bounced up and down. The spring groaned with each movement, a low, metallic creak that seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet park. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, scanning the area. The mother and her toddler were packing up now, leaving us alone with the stranger by the fence. I told myself that if the man was still there 2 minutes from now, we'd leave too. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling, like leaves being disturbed, coming from the bushes near the edge of the playground. I turned my head, squinting into the shadows, but saw nothing. It was probably just the wind, I thought, though the air was still. I shook it off and focused on Lucas, who was now bouncing with all his might, the spring protesting under his weight. "Careful, buddy," I said, stepping closer. "Don't break it." He laughed, oblivious to the unease creeping up my spine. I forced a smile, but my eyes flicked back to the fence. Now the man was gone, even though I didn't see him leave. I scanned the alley, the bushes, and the street beyond, but there was nothing. At first a wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Out of nowhere there was a sound, a sharp, wrenching crack that split the air like a gunshot. The bouncy horse lurched forward as the spring beneath it snapped clean in two, sending Lucas tumbling onto the grass. He hit the ground with a thud, and for a split second I couldn't breathe. "Lucas!" I shouted, rushing over to him. He was already sitting up, wide-eyed and dazed, a patch of dirt smeared across his cheek. "Ow," he mumbled, more surprised than hurt. I knelt beside him, checking his arms, his legs, and his head, anything to make sure he was okay. A small bruise was forming on his knee, but otherwise, thank God, he seemed fine. My hands were shaking as I pulled him into a hug. "What happened, Dad?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, glancing at the broken equipment. The spring was mangled, its coils twisted and jagged, like something had ripped it apart. It didn't make sense though. Those things are built to withstand years of kids jumping on them. How could it just break like that? I stood up, still holding Lucas's hand, and looked around. The park was dead silent now, the swing swaying slightly despite the lack of breeze. Then I saw it, etched into the base of the horse, right where the spring had been attached, were 3 deep gouges. They looked fresh, too precise to be random wear, almost like claw marks. A chill ran down my spine. "We're going home," I said, keeping my tone as steady as I could. Lucas didn't argue, he just clung to my hand as we started toward the car. As we passed the bushes, I heard it again, that rustling, louder this time, accompanied by a low, guttural sound I couldn't place. It wasn't a growl exactly, but it wasn't human either. I picked up the pace, practically dragging Lucas along. "Dad, what's that?" he whispered, his eyes darting toward the bushes. "Just the wind," I lied, though my heart was hammering in my chest. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and for a moment I thought I saw something big hunched low to the ground. It seemed to be moving parallel to us through the undergrowth, but when I blinked, it was gone. We made it to the car, and I buckled Lucas in faster than I ever had before. As I slid into the driver's seat, I checked the rearview mirror. The playground was empty, but just beyond the fence, in the alley, I swore I saw the man in the gray coat again. He was just standing there, watching us, but then when I blinked, he vanished. The drive home was tense. Lucas was quiet, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, while I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see someone, or something, following us. When we got inside, I locked the door and double-checked every window, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I sat on the couch with a beer, staring at the TV without really watching it. My mind kept replaying the day, the man by the fence, the broken spring, those claw marks, and the thing in the bushes. I even pulled up a photo of the playground on my phone, one I'd taken a few weeks earlier, zooming in on the bouncy horse. The spring had looked fine then, sturdy as ever. Maybe it was just a freak accident. Maybe the man was just some creep who liked staring at people. Maybe the noises were a stray dog or a raccoon. But deep down, I knew it didn't add up. The next day, I called the city parks department to report the broken equipment. The guy on the phone sounded bored until I mentioned the claw marks. He paused, then said, "Huh, that's weird. We've had a couple calls like that lately. Playground's messed up overnight, no explanation. Probably just kids messing around." "Overnight?" I said. "This happened in the afternoon." The man didn't have an answer for that. Since then, I haven't taken Lucas back to the park. He hasn't asked to go either, which isn't like him. Last night though, as I was tucking him in, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, the man from the park, he was outside my window." I froze. "What?" "Last night," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He was standing by the tree. He didn't have a face." I laughed it off, told him it was just a bad dream, but my hands were trembling as I pulled his curtains shut. I checked outside, nothing but the empty yard bathed in moonlight. Still, I slept with the lights on that night and a kitchen knife on my nightstand. I don't know what happened at the playground. Maybe it was all in my head, a mix of paranoia and coincidence. Maybe the spring really was faulty, and the rest was my imagination running wild. But when I close my eyes, I can still hear that rustling, still see those claw marks, and still feel those unseen eyes on us. And sometimes, late at night, I think I hear footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, just beyond the walls. I tell myself it's nothing, but I'm not so sure anymore.